Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks, and welcome back to my favourite time of the week. And as part of the Inspiring Leadership series, I am delighted to have my dear friend Matt Oppenheimer, the CEO of Remitly. And Matt is over in Seattle, is that right, Matt? Is that where you are at the moment?
That's right, Jonathan. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you on the series. And the reason why, Matt, I invited you is because when people talk of inspiring leaders, others recommend them. They don't recommend themselves. So I have had people say, I want to be on your show. Yeah, who recommends you? And a lot of people have spoken very highly about you as an inspiring leader. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the interactions we've had over the years. And I find I learn a huge amount from you every time we chat. So Matt, tell us all about sort of your role as CEO and the firm that you've set up, Remitly. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So co-founder and CEO of Remitly, which I started about 9 years ago, after traveling to close to 100 countries and then living in Nairobi, Kenya. And I saw there how difficult it was to send money internationally, and really how expensive, how inconvenient it was, especially for people sending money back to developing countries. And so just to fast forward 9 years later, Remitly is the largest independent digital remittance company in the United States. Our ambitions are actually much bolder and broader than that. It's really, over the long term, to transform the lives of immigrants and their families by providing the most trusted financial services on the planet. So we just launched our second financial services line, which is called Passbook, which is a bank specifically designed for immigrants, which we're super excited about. We have over 1,000 people on the team worldwide. We've raised around $300 million in equity. And we send over $6 billion a year. So we've reached some good scale and size, but it's $6 billion of $600 billion in remittances that are sent every year. It's 1% of that market, and obviously we're just getting started when it comes to a broader set of financial services.
Wow, that's really impressive. And who sort of backed you in those early days when you were trying to get going? Because it must have been tough in those early days.
Yeah, we've been really lucky with a lot of the backers we've had. Everybody from Jeff Bezos to a lot of really great Seattle-based angel investors. And then since then, we've raised from some top-tier Bay Area VCs, DFJ, which is now Threshold Ventures, raised from a great growth equity firm called Stripes, based out of New York, that focuses on consumer. We've raised from Generation most recently, who is really focused on sustainability and sustainable investments. And so we've been really lucky to surround ourselves with really amazing investors over the years.
Yeah. And I must say, whenever I am with other tech entrepreneurs and people, I'm lucky to be an advisor on a couple of tech company boards, as a sort of advisory panel from the leadership point of view. I don't want to get involved in being a Ned. But I say, look, go and watch Matt Oppenheimer's video about why. You've got to, I do congratulate you. You've got a very clear with your video about the experience you just shared about Kenya and realizing that there's a real need and that you filled a need. I think that's brilliantly done. And then on to who inspired you, my sort of next area I'm always interested in. Who would be a couple of people who inspired you, and what were their qualities that you'd pick out that make them inspiring leaders?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people that have inspired me over the years. One person that currently is a big inspiration to me and is obviously very well known is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. And I had the pleasure of interacting with him recently at a very small conference. And what I saw at that conference and what you see publicly is he leads from the heart. He's very authentic. He has very much a growth mindset, and I've been amazed how he's taken an organization like Microsoft that I think had, in a lot of ways, become more fixed mindset as individuals and as a company, and really inspired that organization to grow, learn, develop, and to see everything as more of an opportunity as opposed to a challenge. And so he's a big inspiration for me right now. I just think he's a very phenomenal leader in person, and I've been really impressed with what he's done.
Yeah, great. And who would be the second person that you'd choose as an inspiring leader, and what were their qualities that you admire?
Yeah. The person that comes to mind, outside of family, which there's a lot of people in my family that deeply inspire me, but the other person that comes to mind that's had a huge impact on my life over the years is a guy named Mark Solon, who I met when I job shadowed him in high school, and then I interned with him in Boise, Idaho, at the only venture capital firm in Boise, Idaho called Highway 12 Ventures. And Mark later went on to become one of the key leaders at Techstars, which is an accelerator program that we did. But when I started Remitly, I was in Kenya. I remember being on my roof deck, debating, do I want to make this leap to start this business? And Mark had amazing advice around, why not? It was much more deep than just why not. But he really encouraged me. He's always encouraged me to take the road less traveled. So he gave me great advice to go to Kenya. And one of the things that I think is great about Mark is he's not afraid to take the road less traveled. He's not afraid to make a decision that is different than everybody else and go against the grain. And he's encouraged me to do that personally so many times in my life. And I'm exceptionally grateful for the impact that it's had in my life, because I think it's a key part of what has brought me to Remitly and to this business.
That's fantastic. We may need to get him on the series. He sounds like a really interesting guy.
Yes.
And then, from the people who inspired you to, I always find it very authentic to hear leaders and CEOs particularly admit about the personal mistakes they made, because those who say they've never made a mistake worry me deeply. But what would be a story you'd say about a personal mistake you made, what you learned from it, how it shaped you now as a leader?
Yeah. Well, I think I start with, when I look at what's most important, the reason I do Remitly every day, and I'm pretty intentional about that, is to make a positive impact on people's lives. Our customers, our team, and our investors are kind of the three broad buckets of stakeholders I think about. And so when I think about mistakes, because I've made mistakes every day, I've made mistakes this morning, but when I think about the mistakes that carry the most gravity, it ties back to how have I failed as a leader to make a positive impact on people's lives. And one of the examples that comes to mind is it's very difficult in a growth company to understand the kind of executive skills that are needed at different stages and sizes of the company. So, when you're 5 people versus 50 versus 500, it's just a very different skill set. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And as a first-time entrepreneur, as a company rapidly growing, I would say that one of my failures was not recognizing that one specific executive example that I'm thinking of, it was different skill, and the skills weren't well suited for the stage we were at. And I remember having deep conversations with the board after a board meeting about that. And once I actually saw some examples, got to see that, it was clear to me, and we had to transition executives in that instance. But the reason it was a failure for me is because of the fact that I didn't see it coming, and so I couldn't proactively give that individual feedback along the way to where it was more of a surprise. And I've made a commitment to myself to make sure I'm really uncovering any blind spots I have as a leader, because it's my duty to really understand what's needed at, a year ahead, 2 years ahead, because things can change rapidly. And with that understanding, provide really proactive coaching and feedback.
Great. And so finally, just in the last minute, what would be your top tip for leaders listening? What would you give as a tip?
Top tip that comes to mind is, we have cultural values as a company, which is how people interact and how people get things done. And the first one I think about leadership is leadership applies to every individual in Remitly, and I think every individual trying to accomplish anything in their career. It's not managing people. It doesn't need to be a level of seniority. And when you view leadership from that angle, I think that it ties back to one of our values as a company, which is lead authentically. And the definition for that value that we have is everyone's a leader. We're open, self-aware, and enthusiastically share knowledge and context to help others succeed. But at the heart of lead authentically, which is actually a value we added later in the company to make it explicit, because we refresh our values every year. So this is a new one we just added about 6 months ago. My tip is be yourself. Yeah. If you're trying to lead at any level, at any function, people will see if you're trying to be someone you're not. And so my singular advice, it sounds cliche, but don't try to be someone you're not. Be yourself. Lean into your strengths. Develop those strengths. And know that those strengths, as everybody has, it sounds kind of cheesy, but are beautiful. And be yourself and shine in those strengths.
Perfect. Matt, timing immaculate as always. Thank you very much. You are a great inspiration to me, and I'm sure to many others. But congratulations in the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.